Hey, Mike here. I just wanted to let you know that you can listen to Dark Poutine early and ad-free on Amazon Music, included with Prime. Welcome back to Dark Poutine. I am Mike Brown, and I see my good pal Matthew there.
Hello.
How are you?
Have you ever tried to peel a butternut squash?
Well, you did message me saying you were fighting with a squash, and so I was trying to think, what in the hell is going on? Did the squash become animated and start trying to attack you?
Usually I bake the squash and you can scoop it out, but this recipe calls for you have to take it off. And I swear to God, I need like a woodworking degree in order to do this. I'm going to start a squash peeling union because it's so unfair.
A squash peeling union. Well, there you go. I have never tried to peel a butternut squash, but I have scooped them out before.
Yeah, much easier.
Much easier to scoop rather than peel.
But I'm making a Hasselback butternut squash.
What on earth is that?
When you do lots of little slices in it, and then you massage it with, in this case, sunflower oil, honey, and ginger.
I wish someone would do that to me.
Slice your back and like massage you with honey and ginger?
No, skip the slicing. Just massaging. Just the massaging part.
Too fun.
The views, information, and opinions expressed during the Dark Poutine podcast are solely those of the producer and do not necessarily represent those of Curious Cast, its affiliate, Global News, nor their parent company, Chorus Entertainment.
Dark Poutine is not for the faint of heart or squeamish. Listener discretion is strongly advised. We're not experts on the topics we present, nor are we journalists. We're two ordinary Canadian schmucks chatting about crime and the dark side of history. Let's get to it. Put on your toque, grab yourself a double-double and a Nanaimo bar. It's time to scarf down some Dark Poutine.
You are responsible for obtaining and maintaining at your own cost all equipment needed to listen to Dark Poutine. Dark Poutine can be addictive. Side effects may include, but not be limited to, pausing and questioning the system, elevated heart rate, pondering humanity, odd looks from colleagues as you laugh out loud at work, family members not into true crime worrying about you. Positive side effects may include some perspectives and opinions that you disagree with, as well as some wokeness and empathy. If you don't think Dark Poutine is for you, consult your doctor immediately.
In the annals of Canadian folklore and unsolved mysteries, few stories have endured as hauntingly and stubbornly as that of Jerome, the silent, legless man who appeared from out of nowhere on the remote beach of Sandy Cove, Nova Scotia in September 1863. To this day, no one knows for sure who he was, where he came from, or what chain of events led to his abandonment where he was found. What is known, thanks to accounts recorded by locals and later collected by historians and folklorists, is the extraordinary set of circumstances under which he entered the lives of a small maritime community and remained there, silent and enigmatic, for nearly half a century. This is Dark Poutine, episode 379, The Mystery of Jerome, the Legless Man of Sandy Cove. I covered this story in Chapter 3 of my most recent book, Strange, Spooky, and Supernatural, but it's been on my mind ever since. Jerome's story was so compelling to me that last fall, when I was in Nova Scotia, my birth mom, Diane, and I visited Sandy Cove, where Jerome was discovered. A small plaque to his memory, which briefly outlines his story, overlooks the spot where he was found. Ever since I first learned of his strange tale, and especially since I visited, I've been thinking that Jerome's story deserves a revisit and expansion, so that's my goal here. Digby Neck, where Jerome appeared, is a long, narrow peninsula that juts southwest into the Bay of Fundy from the mainland of Nova Scotia. It's about 45 kilometers in length and no more than 5 kilometers across at its widest point. St. Mary's Bay borders the neck to the southeast and the Bay of Fundy to the northwest. Connected by ferry to Long Island and Briar Island, the region's geography is both isolating and dramatic, with steep cliffs, tidal flats, and dense woodlands separating the scattered communities. The drive to the site feels long, and the area is remote, even by Nova Scotia standards. Sandy Cove feels like a world apart. Isolation defines Sandy Cove more than any map could. The nearest larger community always seems distant, the road winding through fog-bound woods and frostbitten fields before finally reaching civilization. Standing on the headland, Diane and I gazed out into an endless expanse of slate-gray ocean, feeling the remoteness, beautiful, yet undeniably lonely.
Does it feel like the end of the world when you stand there?
It does, kind of, yeah.
And it must have felt like that for poor Jerome, for whatever was happening at the time.
Yeah. Like many coastal places in the province, the wind in Sandy Cove is never truly still. That day that Diane and I were there was no exception. As someone who grew up in Nova Scotia, I can verify that you can taste the ocean in every breath in places like this. Some days, gusts whip up the breakers and whitecaps, hurling themselves against jagged rocks, while on others, bone-chilling fog creeps in, muffling all sound, save for the distant call of a seagull or two. In the 1860s, Digby Neck was a place of hard-scrabble living. Its inhabitants were predominantly English-speaking settlers, some descended from Loyalists who had arrived after the American Revolution. Others were Acadian or Mi'kmaq. Fishing and farming formed the backbone of the local economy, supplemented by small-scale shipbuilding and trade with neighboring communities via schooner. Roads were rough, the land was rocky, and survival required cooperation, resilience, and thrift. The tiny village of Sandy Cove, nestled between forested hills and the sea, was just one of the many tight-knit communities on Digby Neck. Life there revolved around the rhythms of fishing boats, family farms, and church attendance. In such an environment where strangers were rare and immediately noticed, the appearance of a disabled young man, seemingly dropped from nowhere, would become the talk of the region for generations.
Of course he would become the talk. I mean, places like that don't get strangers often, let alone someone like him, right?
No.
No name, no legs, no story. And it's really interesting, like people start filling in the blanks, right? And once they start, they don't stop. I actually love this story, Mike. It's this is how legends are made.
Definitely, and Jerome is 100% a legend, even though he actually existed. So the story goes that just after sunrise on September 8, 1863, two local boys, George Colin Colley Albright, aged 8, and his 10-year-old brother William, were walking along the beach in Sandy Cove. It wasn't unusual for children to patrol the shore after a storm. I mean, I've done it myself. Searching for driftwood, rope, or other flotsam that might be useful to their families or fun to play with. That morning, remnants of a storm still lingered. Wind-blown seaweed littered the beach, and the boys noticed a dark shape just above the tide line. Initially thinking it was a seal or piece of wreckage, they cautiously approached. As they drew closer, they saw something unexpected. The object was human, a man, lying still. Pale, soaked, and unmoving, he looked dead. His clothes, though wet and tattered, were of surprisingly fine make, and his legs appeared to be missing from above the knees. Alarmed, the boys did what any frightened children might do. They poked him with a stick. The figure groaned. The startled boys bolted. They ran for help, their story too strange to be believed at first. Their father, Colin Albright Sr., reportedly dismissed them, assuming they were exaggerating or misinterpreting what they'd seen. But the boys were insistent. William fetched their grandmother, and Colley sought out two nearby farmers, a Mr. Bishop and Mr. Eldridge. Eventually, curiosity outweighed skepticism, and the adults followed the boys to the beach. And when they saw the young man for themselves, their disbelief turned to alarm. According to oral accounts later compiled by local historian Claire H. Gidney, the man appeared to be in his late teens or early 20s. He had blonde hair and piercing blue eyes. He was badly chilled, barely conscious, and completely unable to stand. As the adults approached, He attempted to crawl away, dragging himself toward the surf with his arms.
When this is the one that really hits me in the feels.
Yeah.
He was terrified, not just injured, right?
These are strangers, and we don't...
I know, but if you're like flung onto like a rocky beach somewhere with no legs and people are coming towards you, to be so fearful of people, they're trying to like climb into the ocean. I mean, what kind of life did he have that led to that sort of fear for just other human beings, right?
Right? Yeah. Even in his weakened condition and with obvious physical challenges, the stranger moved with remarkable upper body strength. His panic suggested a deep fear of those approaching, though whether that fear was rooted in trauma or confusion remains unknown. The villagers spoke to him in English, but he made no reply beyond incomprehensible grunts. His expression was described as wild. After a short struggle, the man collapsed. Bishop and Eldridge carefully carried him to the Albright home, where he was stripped of his wet clothes and placed beside the fireplace to warm up. There he was given warm blankets and water, while someone was sent to fetch the village doctor and local priest. When the doctor arrived, he confirmed what others suspected. The legless man's injuries were not the result of an accident at sea. The amputations had likely occurred within the previous week. They were clean, expertly sewn, and bound with professional bandages. Though the man was suffering from exposure and dehydration, there was no indication of gangrene or other infection. He had not been adrift for long. According to oral tradition, the doctor speculated the amputations might have resulted from frostbite or battlefield wounds, but no shipwreck had been reported nearby. No calls for aid had come from the sea. No one in the Digby area had reported a missing sailor or seen any man matching his description. There was only one potential clue. Several villagers reported having seen a ship anchored off the coast of Sandy Cove the night before the stranger was found. It had stayed a short distance offshore, and no one had gone out to interact with its crew. Though the ship was too far out to be clearly identified, some said it resembled a bark or a brig. It was described as wholly unfamiliar. No one aboard the mystery ship made contact with the shore that anyone was aware of. The ship remained until dark and was gone by dawn. Had someone rowed the injured man ashore in the dead of the night? The villagers speculated as much. The morning tide would have wiped away footprints in the sand, and no small boat had been seen, but the possibility seemed plausible. Why would someone abandon a double amputee, especially one so recently wounded, was a question without a humane answer.
Exactly. No matter what angle you come at this from, war, crime, illness, there's no version that isn't really quite deeply messed up, right?
It's cruel.
You know, somebody made a decision to treat him like disposable cargo, and that bothers me, and it should bother everyone.
Yeah, well, it definitely bugs me too. From the first day, a sense of unease surrounded the stranger. He carried no possessions beyond a small water flask and a piece of bread. His fine clothes, soaked with seawater, hinted at a background different from the local fishing folk. His lack of language or effort to communicate struck many as either a psychological block or a deliberate act of silence. The villagers had no name for him. He offered none, but within days they began referring to him by the sound he made when asked who he was, something resembling Jerome. Whether this was a slurred word, a hallucinated utterance, or his actual name, no one knew, ever. The name stuck. He would be called Jerome for the rest of his life.
Yeah, that's kind of heartbreaking in a way. You know, your whole identity becomes a grunt that sounded close enough to a name.
Yeah.
But I guess people needed to call him something. You know,
sure.
And, you know, without that, you know.
They could have called him just Legless Guy, and that would have been even more rude.
Or Bob.
Oh, no. Oh, no, I get what you're talking about.
But yeah, this story, so many good people in this story.
Yep. Oh, definitely. So once Jerome had been brought into the Albright home, a new phase of uncertainty began. As the hours passed and the initial shock wore off, the people of Sandy Cove turned their attention to the question of what to do with him. The first priority was survival, of course. The stranger was suffering from exposure, possibly pneumonia, and his injuries required continued medical attention. But as he began to recover physically, the larger problem emerged. Who was he, and why had he been abandoned on their shore? The Albrights were a poor family with limited resources. Still, like many rural Nova Scotian families of the time, they believed strongly in charity and Christian duty. For the first several days, Jerome was kept close to the fire and fed simple broth and bread. He refused solid food, barely touched water, and remained largely nonverbal, letting out only the occasional grunt or low moan. Despite repeated efforts to question him, he gave no clear answers, not even a word, other than that sound he made that sounded like the name Jerome. Locals visited the Albrights out of curiosity, sympathy, and concern. Some brought blankets, food, or clothing, others came to gawk. In a community of just a few hundred people, word of Jerome's appearance spread fast. It wasn't long before people from neighboring villages made the journey to Sandy Cove to see the mysterious young man with no legs.
Yeah, and this is where it kind of turns into something else for a while. Not care, but curiosity, and that sort of line between compassion and spectacle gets blurry real fast. Right?
It's like the story of the Elephant Man.
Yeah, or the Dion quintuplets, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's a freak show for people.
Yeah.
According to community lore, later collected in Tales from the Bay of Fundy, villagers who spoke multiple languages tried to communicate with Jerome. They attempted English and French first, then German, Spanish, Italian, Gaelic, and even Latin. A few claimed he showed recognition when spoken to in French, but he never responded with anything intelligible. He did not write, gesture meaningfully, or make eye contact for long.
It's not like he was just silent. Like, he was sealed off. Like, he was behind this wall, right? That nobody could figure out how to climb over.
Right.
Usually there's some form of understanding, right? But nothing was working.
Right. I wonder if he wasn't like a nonverbal person, like with some sort of neurodivergence or something.
Yeah.
I mean, in those days, that wouldn't be what people would think about.
Yeah, I mean, it's... here we are, putting something else into the vessel.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, everyone
speculates, yeah.
Yeah.
With no answers forthcoming from the man himself, theories began to circulate. The first and most common assumption was that Jerome had been a sailor, perhaps involved in a recent battle or accident, who his shipmates had cast off after becoming a burden. This matched with the sighting of the mysterious vessel offshore the previous night. Another theory suggested Jerome was a deserter from the American Civil War, which had been raging in the South since 1861. Perhaps he'd fled the battlefield, been wounded, and sent north to avoid retribution or to find treatment. Some thought he might have been a prisoner of war or even a spy. Others believed his origins were more aristocratic. Was he the illegitimate son of a noble family? Had he been maimed and exiled to preserve some social order or protect a political secret? Such ideas, though far-fetched, captured the imaginations of locals. Still others floated darker theories, that Jerome had been a criminal punished for his deeds by amputation and abandonment, or a pirate betrayed by his crew, or a victim of trafficking who'd somehow escaped or been disposed of. One resident of Sandy Cove years later told the Digby Courier, quote, "He could have been anybody. That was the trouble. The silence let your imagination fill in the blanks." End quote.
And you know what usually happens when people fill in the blanks? They either fill it with what they are afraid of or what they secretly wish were true.
Yeah.
Versus like actually really thinking about it. But I think what's interesting about this is Jerome's starting to become a mirror that everyone's projecting all their stuff onto him.
Maybe he was a monk of some description, no? He's like... He had chosen silence, perhaps.
Monk.
No, well, I tried. As the days stretched into weeks, it became clear that Jerome would not be recovering quickly. The Albrights, despite their generosity, could not afford to support an additional adult, especially one who required near constant care. The local Baptist congregation discussed options. Eventually, a better-off family in Mink Cove, the Gidneys, agreed to take Jerome into their home. The Gidneys had a larger farm and more resources, and they were well known in the area for their charitable work. Jerome was transferred to their care sometime in the late autumn of 1863. There, he reportedly became slightly more active. He spent time near the hearth, accepted food more regularly, and even attempted to move himself across the floor using his arms. He would not or could not use crutches. Instead, he swung his body forward, using his upper arms and stumps, and relied on his considerable upper body strength to bump along on his bum. Doctors who examined Jerome over the years all came to the same conclusion. His amputations were surgical and they'd been performed by someone with medical training. The wounds were smooth and the stitching professional. Every medical person who saw Jerome had speculations about how the man had lost his legs. As Jerome wasn't communicating, these were all just educated guesses. One physician, writing in a private letter published posthumously in Nova Scotian Curiosities, noted, quote, "The man known as Jerome may have lost his legs by the hand of a competent surgeon, but why or under what circumstance I dare not say. His silence closes every door." End quote. In 1864, Jerome was moved again, this time to the home of a man known as Jean Nicolas, a Corsican who lived near Metegan. The locals called Nicolas the Russian, though he was neither Russian nor particularly foreign in appearance. He spoke French and Italian and had come to Nova Scotia via Quebec. Nothing remotely Russian.
These small towns always give nicknames. Like
Yeah.
There's one friend of my extended family that was from Quebec, and I've only ever heard him referred to as Frenchie.
Yeah.
For 50 years. I don't even know what his name is. It's Frenchie.
A few of my friends have Scottish friends, and they're all different, but all of those Scottish friends are named Scotty.
Oh, jeez Louise.
Yeah, it's like, come on, get creative.
Yeah, exactly. At least call him the Russian.
Or Angus. Nicola was intrigued by Jerome and hoped that speaking to him in Italian or French might unlock his silence. For months he tried, switching dialects, reading aloud, even playing music, but Jerome remained mute. He wasn't deaf. It was clear that he could hear people, but he just never said anything. Despite the communication barrier, Jerome and Nicola developed a kind of routine. Jerome seemed to tolerate Nicola more than most and over time became more mobile. He used his arms to propel himself around the house and ate, dressed, and washed with minimal assistance. By the mid-1860s, Jerome's care had become a matter of provincial attention. Recognizing the financial burden on his caregivers and the uniqueness of his situation, the government of Nova Scotia authorized a weekly stipend of $2 to support Jerome's upkeep. This was an unusual move for the time, especially for someone with no known identity, citizenship, or ties to anything or anyone. That stipend would follow him for the rest of his life, even as he changed homes and caregivers. It was paid to the household, not to Jerome himself, and was considered sufficient to cover his basic needs. According to provincial records from 1865 housed at the Nova Scotia Archives, the disbursement was listed under the category of special relief cases. It included only 2 individuals, Jerome and an unnamed Mi'kmaq child with a congenital illness. For all the care and concern extended to him, Jerome never broke his silence. He lived among the people of Digby Neck and Clare, watched their children grow up, witnessed deaths, weddings, and seasonal changes, but said not a word that anyone could understand. A theological student from Halifax who visited Nicola in the late 1860s described Jerome as, quote, "a man clearly capable of reason, whose silence seems willed, not imposed," end quote. In a letter published in the Acadian Recorder, the student wrote, quote, "He listens, he understands, he does not reply. I believe he could speak, but chooses not to," end quote.
It's interesting, the idea that he chose not to, maybe.
Yeah.
You know, he's not saying anything to anyone, and I kind of like the idea that he chose not to. Maybe he felt like that's the last thing he could control in his life.
Maybe.
Like, maybe he decided he didn't want to say anything, and like he was so in everyone else's control that maybe just not speaking was the one thing he could control.
Yeah. Like, you control me, I shut up. Whether his silence was the result of trauma, illness, or stubbornness is a question that remains unanswered. After Jean Nicolas' wife passed away, he made the decision to return to Europe, leaving Nova Scotia sometime in the early 1870s. At that point, Jerome was placed in the care of Didier and Zabeth Cameau of Saint Alphonse de Clare, a small community near Metegan. This final transition would see Jerome living with the Cameau family for the next 37 years until he died in 1912. Though Jerome had grown accustomed to new households, the move to the Cameaus marked the beginning of his most stable and prolonged period of life. The Cameaus were Acadian, and Zabeth Cameau in particular took on the task of caring for Jerome with compassion and commitment. Their home was modest but comfortable, and they raised several children during the decades that Jerome lived with them. Over time, he became a kind of silent fixture in the household, a man both present and apart. The children learned not to question his silence. They grew up with Jerome, sitting by the stove, quietly observing, sometimes muttering to himself, but never engaging in conversation. Zabeth tended to his needs, ensured he was clothed and fed, and kept his room clean. Though he ate alone and rarely joined family gatherings, he was never treated unkindly. An oral account recorded in the early 20th century by Clare folklorist Anselme d'Entremont described Zabeth's care of Jerome as, quote, gentle, patient, and without complaint, end quote. In interviews with her descendants, some recalled hearing that she would sometimes speak to Jerome softly as she worked near him, never expecting a reply nor receiving one.
Yeah, and that sort of care where you show up every day, speak kindly, expect nothing back is really rare, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she didn't need to talk to him to treat him like a person, right? And
yeah.
She sort of gave him some dignity, and it's something he deserved.
For sure. He's a human being, after all.
Absolutely.
We'll hear more about Jerome after the break. And we are back. Matthew, thoughts so far?
Yeah, I think what kind of strikes me here is, in a weird way, this story is about us more than Jerome in a lot of ways. Like, what I mean by that is how people react when somebody doesn't fit the script, right? And when they won't explain themselves or they can't, and like
right.
what we sort of all do.
Yep.
And you can see these villagers trying to figure him out and to slot him into like all these different storylines, like war hero, criminal, cursed, noble, right? Because I think real silence for most of us is really uncomfortable. Nobody knows how to sit with silence anymore. And maybe not back then, maybe more so, but definitely not today. And, we tend to tell stories to fill the space. I mean, have you ever been somewhere where there's like a lull and you feel like you have to say something because it's just like the silence is just too much? You just like start blabbing away. Have you ever done that?
It's what I do constantly.
Oh my God, there's silence. I need to speak.
Yep.
Right? What keeps hitting me here is how much they did for him anyway, right? Like, these weren't rich people. Right. No. The ones that could look after him looked after him and until they couldn't. And that would have been a bit of an actual hardship in harder times back then. Right. They fed him, they clothed him, they carried him from house to house, all without getting a single answer from him and no backstory. And there's kind of just decades of quiet care and probably good care for back then. You know what I mean? And I think that kind of says something about the place and the time and I think maybe the community as well. When, back then and in small towns, relationships are much less transactional than they are in big cities.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Jerome didn't give much in the usual sense, but he mattered. And for some people that was enough, which is quite beautiful.
Totally. Jerome's daily routine was simple and unchanging. He awoke early, ate a light breakfast, and then settled into his chair by the wood stove. Occasionally he would shuffle to the window using his arms and stumps, or retreat to his bed for a midday rest. At night he was often heard muttering to himself in a low voice. What language he spoke, if it was a language at all, no one could determine. One visitor, writing in the Nanaimo Free Press on September 28, 1905, described Jerome as, quote, a man who bears the air of refinement despite his long silence. His white hair was drawn back neatly from his high forehead. He wore a narrow white mustache and a pointed beard, not unlike the style popular in the salons of Paris. His silence was not dull or vacant, but gave the impression of a man inwardly busy with thought, end quote. By then, Jerome had reportedly not left the house in more than 15 years. He refused to go outside and rarely acknowledged visitors unless they surprised him. His hearing remained acute, and he would stop muttering the moment he detected approaching footsteps. A local priest who had known Jerome since the 1860s told a Halifax journalist in 1906, quote, he lives in his own world. He's aware of ours, but does not participate in it. Perhaps he has forgotten his own language. Perhaps he never wished to share it, end quote. Over the years, several medical professionals, psychologists, and religious thinkers attempted to make sense of Jerome's behavior. Interpretations varied widely. Some believed Jerome was suffering from what would now be classified as post-traumatic stress, catatonia, or selective mutism. The trauma of his amputations, exile, and abandonment may have driven him to retreat into silence. Others thought he had suffered a neurological injury that robbed him of speech. There were also those who thought his silence was willful, a protest against what had been done to him. A theological student from Halifax who spent a week with the Comeaus in 1899 wrote in a private letter, quote, "He has the eyes of a man who listens. He hears every word, every rustle. His expression changes when one speaks kindly or cruelly. He is not absent. He is stubborn. He is silent because it is the one power he still holds." End quote.
Yeah, there you go, right? That's what I was saying earlier. Like it's kind of control. You know, when you, like, sometimes if I get in an argument with my husband,
yeah,
and I'm like, I'm not going to speak for the rest of the evening, right?
Oh, I'm sure Justin is probably like, oh, thank goodness.
He is. So then I, like, 15 minutes later, I start talking again.
Yeah.
He's like, silence, yay.
Yeah. Still, no one could say with certainty whether Jerome had ever been capable of actual speech following his arrival. The muttering never seemed to make any sense at all. At least it was in no language understood by anyone who ever listened. Throughout his years with the Comeaus, the provincial stipend that had been first issued in the 1860s continued to arrive. Occasionally, clothing was donated by neighbors or church members. Jerome's needs were few. As we mentioned, Zabeth Comeau, by all accounts, never resented the burden of Jerome. Her grandchildren later recalled hearing that she, quote, spoke to him like he was one of her own, and would sometimes read aloud to him from the Bible or the local newspaper. Despite her kindness, Jerome never responded in kind. He didn't smile, he didn't cry, and never showed outward affection, yet he remained in a life where he had every reason to withdraw completely. His continued presence suggested some measure of peace. On April 15, 1912, Jerome died quietly in the Comeau home. He had been living in Nova Scotia for 49 years. That same day, in the Atlantic, approximately 1,343 kilometers east-southeast as the crow flies, another nautical tragedy occurred when the RMS Titanic struck an iceberg and began sinking. While Jerome passed away quietly in rural Nova Scotia, one of the most infamous maritime disasters in history was unfolding off the coast of Newfoundland. As the Titanic sank, she took over 1,500 souls with her. Overshadowed by news of the ocean liner sinking, Jerome's death was not widely reported at the time. It was marked with a simple burial in the Meteghan area. A small gravestone bearing the name Jerome marks the spot today.
It's strange, right? Sort of this one man dies in total obscurity while the world watches thousands go down literally in history.
Mm-hmm.
But Jerome in his quiet way stuck around, no headlines. He's sort of this slow, stubborn mystery. Of course we still talk about the Titanic, but look at us, we're talking about this guy.
Yeah.
He's this mystery that remained, and we're still talking about him, and there's something interesting in that.
The story was newsworthy. While I was researching, I found a couple of articles that mentioned him amid the noise of the Titanic.
Okay.
It was newsworthy, but not quite as much as, all those souls going.
Rich dudes going down in a boat.
Yeah, exactly. There was no funeral procession, no grand obituary, but in the years following his death, the story of the Legless man of Sandy Cove took on new life. With Jerome gone, his story passed into the realm of legend. Writers began to revisit the case in local newspapers, often romanticizing the mystery. Some portrayed him as a lost prince, exiled for political reasons. Others wrote fictionalized accounts in which he was a pirate who had betrayed his crew or been betrayed by them. Still others leaned into the theory of wartime desertion or medical exile. None of these theories could be proven, but Jerome's story, precisely because it was incomplete, refused to be forgotten. His grave has become a local landmark. School children were told his tale, and tourists who visited Digby Neck often heard his name mentioned alongside stories of shipwrecks, hauntings, and maritime hardship. He became a figure of melancholy fascination, an unspeaking witness to part of Nova Scotia's history that was both compassionate and unsettling. In 1963, on the 100th anniversary of Jerome's discovery, a small local ceremony was held near Sandy Cove. The community gathered to reflect on the mystery and to honor the man they had once taken in without question, even as his identity remained unknowable. A wooden cross was briefly erected near the beach to mark the place where he was found, though it has long since been reclaimed by the elements. As Nova Scotia entered the modern era, the story of Jerome remained one of its most compelling unsolved puzzles, equal parts tragedy and testimony. Despite nearly 5 decades of life among Nova Scotians, the man known as Jerome never revealed his identity. His origins, nationality, and the circumstances that brought him to Sandy Cove remain shrouded in silence. But more than a century after his death, researchers and historians began to revisit his story with new tools and fresh determination. One modern theory, supported by archival work and oral histories, suggests that Jerome may not have been a complete mystery after all. In 2022, Saltwire News featured an interview with Lise Robichaud, a historian and folklorist from Clare who had become fascinated with Jerome's story as a teenager. Working in collaboration with Dr. Carolyn Isabelle Caron, a researcher at the University of Victoria, Robichaud began to compare Jerome's case with another obscure figure from regional history, a man known as Gamby. According to local records and Robichaud's research, Gamby was a foreign man discovered in the village of Chipman, New Brunswick in the winter of 1859. He reportedly appeared suddenly, alone, and speaking no English. Descriptions suggest that Gamby, like Jerome, was in a disoriented state and was either unable or refused to communicate. Gamby had suffered severe frostbite. His injuries were so extensive that both legs were eventually amputated in 1861. In the years that followed, he became increasingly dependent on the charity of Chipman's residents. With no known family, no ability to speak, and increasing medical needs, Gamby's presence became a challenge for the small rural community. By 1863, local officials began quietly looking for a resolution. As Robichaud explained in her Saltwire interview, quote, "There's no official record that says Gamby was put on a boat and sent to Nova Scotia, but there are gaps in the Chipman record that coincide exactly with Jerome's sudden appearance. Gamby disappears, Jerome appears. The dates, the condition, the silence, it all aligns." Robichaud and Caron combed through church registers, hospital ledgers, and provincial census data to follow the trail. Though gaps remained, they found enough overlap to suggest a possible transfer. In particular, one 1861 Chipman medical report described Gamby's condition and amputation in nearly the same terms used by Nova Scotian doctors examining Jerome 2 years later. It does not describe, though, how Jerome's injuries appeared to be fresh when he was found 2 years later. Anyway, New Brunswick historian Dr. Peter Larocque reviewed the theory in a 2023 conference paper titled Borderline Humanity, Displacement and the Disabled in 19th Century Maritime Canada. Larocque acknowledged that many communities facing the care of individuals with severe disabilities or mental illness would sometimes seek informal arrangements relocating the person quietly to another province or parish. There were no formal social services at the time, and such practices, while ethically dubious, were not uncommon. Quote, "In rural Canada," Larocque wrote, "communities looked after their own until they could not. The undocumented movement of vulnerable people across parish or provincial lines was part of a quiet survival strategy." End quote.
Yeah, I mean, even where I'm from, back in my grandparents' or great-grandparents' days, I've heard stories of woman dying during childbirth, and farmer already has 5 children, so the baby literally is just given to the family next door.
Yep.
Like, none of this official stuff. People just looked after each other.
Yeah. So what about this Gamby? What if he and Jerome were indeed the same man? It suggests that Jerome was not a lost prince or abandoned sailor, but rather an unfortunate victim of frostbite displaced by a struggling community. The name Gamby itself is ambiguous. Some have speculated it may have been a corrupted pronunciation of a French, Italian, or even Arabic name. It was never confirmed that Gamby gave this name himself, just as Jerome's utterance of something that sounded like Jerome may have been misheard or misunderstood. Robichaud points out that both men were described as speaking in strange syllables, often repeating themselves and appearing agitated when asked questions. Both were noted for having moments of calm followed by periods of emotional withdrawal. Both showed signs of understanding French, although neither could communicate in that language. One observer in Chipman described Gamby as, quote, sitting for hours staring at the fire, whispering to himself in a foreign tongue, end quote. The description echoes reports of Jerome muttering alone beside the stove in the Comeau home, decades later. Despite the growing acceptance of the Gamby theory among some historians, not all locals share this view. For many residents of Digby Neck and Clare, Jerome is not just a historical figure, he's a cultural icon. Like Winston Churchill's often misquoted thought about Russia, to many, Jerome is, quote, a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma, end quote. Reducing him to a forgotten transplant from another province doesn't sit well with everyone. In a 2022 community forum held at the University of St. Anne, some attendees expressed skepticism. One participant remarked, quote, Jerome belongs to us. His story is part of our place. It feels wrong to say he was sent here like a burden.
Hear, hear.
Yeah. Others have been more receptive to the Gamby idea, especially if it helped explain Jerome's fate in a way that didn't rely on fantasy. Quote, it doesn't change the kindness shown to him, said another attendee. If anything, it makes what our ancestors did for him even more admirable. With no known biological relatives and no preserved tissue, a DNA analysis of Jerome's remains is currently impossible. His grave, marked Jerome, lies in a modest cemetery in the Meteghan area. He's never been exhumed, and no known personal effects are known to survive. In 2023, a local historical society proposed erecting a more substantial monument near the site of discovery in Sandy Cove. The initiative, titled Jerome's Landing, aims to provide historical context, honor the man's endurance, and present visitors with an overview of both the traditional story and the Gamby theory. The fundraising is ongoing. Ultimately, the question of Jerome's identity may never be fully resolved. However, his story continues to resonate with something larger. The way communities respond to those in need, the limitations of empathy, and the ways people cope with the unknown. Robichaud summed it up best in her interview, quote, we may never know who Jerome really was, but we know who he became. He became a part of our history, and even in silence he continues to tell us something about ourselves, end quote. As time marches on, Jerome remains fixed in our imaginations, a silent sentinel of the past whose absence of voice gave rise to 1,000 stories.
Yay! I love this story. There's so much good in it for a change. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so often we do stories where there's really not a lot of lovable characters, but there was
Except the people who are usually dead.
Yeah, exactly, right? Exactly. Yeah. So it's great that
there were some people who cared for Jerome,
and he found a home in a way. I'd like to think that he was happy eventually.
Sure. And that is it for Dark Poutine episode 379, The Mystery of Jerome, the Legless Man of Sandy Cove.
That's right. It's time for voicemails. You can leave us a message at 1-877-327-5786 or 1-877-DARK-PTN. We'd love to hear from you. Let's see who called us this week.
We do have some voicemails, so let's get to them. Here's the first one.
Yes, Mike, Matthew. I was just getting caught up listening to your programs, and I noticed the last couple episodes that nobody had the courtesy of leaving you a voicemail. So I thought, well, you know, I went through some emotional scarring in my time, and those emotional scars are sometimes the hardest to heal. So here it goes. You guys make my day, my week, and I look forward to hearing your next program. And Mike, I just wanted to know, in your very early episodes, you know, with that other guy, you would reference The Sopranos, and that's from my neck of the Pine Barrens. And I was just wondering, seeing as how it's the greatest show ever, I think, if you could maybe make some more references to them, because, we all miss Mr. Gandolfini and Mr. Sirocco as they've passed along, and I miss them, and it would be really awesome if you guys were to, make some references every now and then. And Matthew, I gotta say, you are way, way better of a host than, like I said, the other guy. You two guys complement each other like salt and pepper, ebony and ivory, and prosciutto and melon. You guys keep up the good work. All right, then. Go shit in your hats, bastard.
That sounded like Saul Rosenberg from the Jerky Boys. Holy smokes.
Love it.
My life is complete. Somebody from New Jersey called me and told me to go shit in my hat. For those who don't know, that reference is my favorite line from The Sopranos. Go shit in your hat. It's Junior Soprano. Look, somebody says something to him. He's sitting on his couch and he just looks at them and says, "Go shit in your hat."
That was such a good show.
I loved The Sopranos. The Sopranos is still by far my favorite television program of all time. All time.
Wow.
All time. No question. Without question. I've watched it through probably 8 times. And I guess it explains a lot about me. But James Gandolfini, Tony Soprano, Mr. Sirocco is Polly Walnuts, also one of my favorite all-time characters.
And,
oh, my goodness.
What's her name, the actress? She's such a good actress.
Edie
Tony's
Falco?
wife. Yeah, she is such a good actress.
Yeah. Carmela. Yeah.
Carmela.
I mean, everybody in that show was brilliant. Everyone was brilliant.
Everyone was a good character, right?
Right. They were so deep and it was such dark stuff, but it was really funny at the same time.
My favorite line is when the son goes, I haven't seen it where's the fucking ziti?
Yeah.
And he gets smacked. Do you remember
We're not going to have any fucking ziti? Yeah.
And he's like this kid, and they're like, how dare you?
Anthony. But thank you very much for calling. Yes. Go shit in your hat.
Yeah. So I think that wonderful caller is a filmmaker.
A filmmaker, of course.
Yeah, there's storytelling in that voice, right? Mm-hmm. There's history in that voice, and definitely a filmmaker is sort of New York, New Jersey, stories.
I'm kind of hoping it was David Chase from who actually created The Sopranos.
Yeah, that'd be hilarious.
That would mention my show some more. Let's move on. We've got another voicemail.
Hi, you guys. I've been listening to your podcast for quite a long time. I'm not going to give my name just because I'm involved in litigation against her, but I just listened to, the first part of your Bridget Colleroux episode, and you mentioned you can't imagine how violating it is to be part of that. Well, I can. You likely saw some of the videos of us victims explaining how it feels. I've basically lost all trust. I've had to have a surgery. I've had 2 children after, and it's never gotten easier. I'm still daily figuring out how to deal with that kind of trauma. I never want to set foot in a hospital if I can avoid it, unless I've known the doctors for the majority of my life. And it's just ridiculous how much that affects people. So I just wanted to thank you guys for bringing it to light and explaining exactly what this woman did, because it's hard to put into words the effect that it can have on the victims like me, and it is still ongoing in the legal system. So not going to give my name, but yeah, I really appreciate you guys. You do such a good job. Thank you so much for doing it. Even though it's one that's going to take me several tries to get through. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate you guys. And yeah, go shit in your hat. Bye now.
I applaud your courage. Like, really, I applaud your courage for even approaching, listening, and then calling us to talk to us about that. Because
I hope he did right by you.
Yeah, I really do too. Yeah,
I try so hard because I know there are people out there, right, that listen, and I hope we did right by you. And because I just felt, a lot of people who. I've spent a lot of time in hospitals, right, Mike?
Yes.
And I think a lot of people don't understand the depth of how bad this is. You know what I mean? Because it's not sort of big, it's not like a serial killer story. It's like, oh, somebody faked being a nurse. But no, it's absolutely terrible, right?
Yeah.
And telling that story was important. So, like I said, I hope we did right by you.
Yeah, thank you very, very much. We appreciate, as I said, your courage. And the fact that you could muster a go shit in your hat at the end of that is like icing on the cake.
Or shit in the hat.
Yeah. That's it for this week's voicemails. Again, you can leave us one at 1-877-327-5786 or 1-877-DARK-PTN. We'd love to hear from you, even if it is just to say hi and to tell us to go shit in our hats. If you're stumped for what to chat with us about, a quick story is welcome. Okay, we do have a couple of patrons this week.
Patreon!
Our first one is somebody named Cody Hill, and they're from Weymouth, Nova Scotia. Cody Hill from Weymouth, Nova Scotia. I'm not sure if I've done these already because my brain from week to week just exits, But
yeah,
anyway.
I can't remember if we did, but let's shout out Cody again.
Okay. So
thank you, Cody. Cody Hill. Doesn't that sound like, it's a character in a TV show and the name of the show is named after the character?
Yeah.
Tonight on Cody Hill.
Tonight on Cody Hill. Yeah.
Last season on Cody Hill.
So if Cody Hill is interesting enough to have a TV show named after them, what's the subject of the show?
Bachelor farmer.
Okay.
Right, trying with two kids, not bachelor, widowed farmer with two kids, trying to make a go of farming and trying to find love.
So sort of like Farming for Love, like our buddy Kirkland, and
but
without the gays.
Yeah, no, but not a fake, not a stupid reality one.
Right? Hey, I thought Farming for Love was good. Anyway.
Oh, reality TV shows. Vobshe is a Russian word for in general. I don't really like. I only watch the ones that you're on, Mike.
Which would be one.
Which would be one.
Yeah. Next we have. Well, thank you, Cody. Much
Thanks,
appreciated
Cody.
for being, a farmer looking for love. Next we have A.M. Iman, and we don't know where A.M. is from. We don't know whether A.M. we don't know what gender AM is, and we're unsure of what AM does for a living. But all we know is AM Iman is a patron. So
AM Iman, so you're mispronouncing Iman, it's Iman, okay?
Oh, no, it's spelled EIYMAN.
Okay, she's
still
spelling
Iman.
it. She's still spelling it strangely. So Iman,
wife of David Bowie.
She didn't want. She misspelled it because she didn't want us to know it was actually her.
Oh, okay.
But she's not a morning person. So no, she is a morning person. So she calls herself AM Iman and PM Iman.
Okay.
So because she's a morning person, she thought she was in a good mood. She became a Patreon. So it's from AM Iman.
Well, thank you, Iman. Much appreciated.
Supermodel, you.
Supermodel. Loved
Hope you're doing well post the death of your husband.
David Bowie was a genius. Thanks to all our patrons and Donut Money donors, past and present, for your generosity. It helps to keep the show going. You can become a patron of Dark Poutine at patreon.com/darkpoutine. For a one-time donation, you can send us donut money via PayPal or interact using our email address, darkpoutine@gmail.com. If you don't already subscribe to the show, it would mean a lot if you did. You can easily find Dark Poutine on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. If you haven't gotten yours yet, my 2 books are available to order via links on the Dark Poutine website or anywhere fine books are sold. And speaking of darkpoutine.com, check it out for show notes and other cool stuff. We'd appreciate it if you gave Dark Poutine a like or a follow on Facebook and Instagram. Most importantly, thank you for listening. Tell your friends about us. Word of mouth is a powerful thing. And that's it for this episode of Dark Poutine, so until next time, don't forget to be a good egg and not a bad apple.
Goodbye, ladies. Goodbye, ladies and gentlemen.
And non-binaries.
And dogs and cats.
Dogs and cats living together.
Dogs and cats do listen to the show, you know.
It's anarchy. I know. Steve listens. I know he does.
Steve's just like laying down, totally ignoring me right now.
Anyway, bye, folks.